Welcome to Making It with Terry Wollman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Wollman.
Welcome to Making It. Presented to you by Fireside. I'm your host, Terry Wollman, and my guest today is guitarist Jennifer Batten. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share my intention with you that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance, and don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, we'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of our show, so make it count. Simply request an invite to speak, and my moderator, Dr. Lisa, will bring you on stage to join in on our conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Jennifer Batten began playing guitar at age 8. She graduated from the Musicians Institute in 1979, and in 1987 auditioned and was chosen from 100 guitarists to play on Michael Jackson's Bad Tour. Jennifer traveled the globe for 1.5 years and continued playing in Jackson's band for 10 years. After the Bad Tour, she recorded her debut CD, Above, Below, and Beyond, with producer Michael Sembello, releasing it right before the launch of the Dangerous Tour. Following that, she released her album Momentum and began what would become Jackson's final History Tour. Less than a year later, guitar icon Jeff Beck asked her to join his band. Batten toured and recorded with him for 3 years, followed by a Las Vegas residency with Cirque du Soleil. She was honored to receive the She Rocks Icon Award and was also inducted into Guitar Player magazine's Gallery of the Greats. Jennifer continues to record, tour, and create. Her latest album is called Battle Zone. Jennifer Batten, welcome to Making It.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
You're so welcome, and so am I. It's great to see you. And in a very small, in some ways, our community of artists and musicians is very small, but it's also very wide, globally. And this is the first time that we've met. And I think partially proximity, because we don't live in the same city. But I was, so I'm really happy to meet you. And I was surprised it took us this long because we've both been doing this a long time. We're relatively close to the same age. So I'm happy to meet you.
Yeah, usually I only meet people in airports.
That's true. And we haven't been in any for a while. Right?
Yeah, right? Which is kind of joyous.
It is. Have you flown yet since COVID? I have not.
I have. I had a short tour in July, August in England. And I'm telling you, the amount of stress it took to get there, because they wanted a quarantine of 5 days and 100 COVID shots and paperwork. And it was kind of a nightmare. I mean, traveling always sucks for the most part. I'm kind of over it and have been for years.
Yeah.
But once you get there and play for people, you go, this feels good.
That's true. Yeah.
And people are hungry for music. They're hungry to get out now.
Yes. And I have noticed, and have told my band members also, the couple of performances that we've been starting to do, is that it's kind of hard to get it wrong. I know in some ways we're getting our sea legs back and being on stage again and the traveling and the whole aspect of it, but it's almost like burning water, like audiences have, along with us, sort of forgotten how to be in an audience. So we're kind of, I see it as we're gathering and celebrating together this mindful return to live performance.
Yeah. It's long overdue. It makes you really appreciate community when you take it for granted on the natch.
Right.
all of a sudden, I really notice my brain chemistry changing when I get to hang out with humans.
Right.
It's like my dogs are great and I talk to them a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but getting the energy exchange of friends and people in the audience there's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's so true. How does it change for you? Do you feel just happier, lighter?
Yeah, it's almost like I'm getting my humanity back.
Right.
The elements of what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a few of those away, like food or water, it doesn't feel too good.
Right.
But community is one of the elements that has to be there to be mentally healthy.
Yes, and we are as human beings and as animals, part of the animal planet, we are not designed to be alone. We're wired to have human touch,
Yeah,
physical
yeah.
touch, and interaction and warmth and all those things. So it's very unnatural to be that isolated for so long.
Well, there's a movement to stop solitary confinement in jails because it's torture.
No kidding.
It's a form of torture.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Lisa, I just want to say hi and thanks for helping us get the show started today. How are you?
Hey, good to be here. I'm excited to be here as always, but especially because this woman is a badass.
Yes, she is. Yeah, this is a girl power show today.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you.
So we're gonna bring on a mutual friend of ours in a quick moment, but I just wanted to start off. We're gonna be talking about your career and your upbringing. You've been playing since the age of 8, and you graduated from the 3rd class of Musicians Institute, so early on in the program, and of course, chosen one out of 100 people that you auditioned alongside to get the Michael Jackson tour. I want to talk about today your early life and the time studying at GIT and that, but also that 8 years between graduating and the beginning of your major touring career. Because that, I think there's a lot of interesting story to tell in there. So we can, and just one little piece of trivia that you gave me that I found really interesting, and then I'll bring our mutual friend on just to say hi. One thing that surprised me was that you were not a prodigy guitarist. In other words, because you've grown to become one of the iconic guitarists in the world, and you've earned it. You've worked really hard to achieve that. But the key is that you're a really hard worker, just like I am. Like, I wasn't a prodigy either. I've just really applied myself and worked really hard. And can you share with me what you told me yesterday? Basically auditioned for GIT or took the test?
I had been taking lessons in local music shops in various cities, wherever the family moved, since I was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And I just went to Hollywood. Actually, Musicians Institute was just Guitar Institute of Technology when it first started. No bass, no drums. And they were advertising in Guitar Player magazine to try to get students because it was new and people didn't know about it. And I took a trip from San Diego to LA for a weekend symposium, which most of the information was just like flying over my head, splattered on the wall behind me. I had no idea what they were talking about. It was all jazz players.
Oh, right.
But I was intrigued enough to take a test to try to get into the school at the end, and I failed miserably. I mean, one of the questions the president asked me was, can you play a G major 7? And the only G I knew with a 7 was a dominant 7-chord first position. Sure. I didn't know the difference. I didn't know chord scales. I didn't know diatonic scales. I only knew pentatonic and blues scales. So he said, you're not quite cooked yet, And I went to San Diego and studied with jazz guitar player Peter Sprague for 6 months, and he whooped my ass. I mean, and I kept up with the lessons. I absorbed everything he was showing me. Chet Baker trumpet solos and chord scales, chord melodies. And 6 months later, I was able to get into the school.
Thanks for sharing that, because I think it's really interesting. And I suppose not surprising to me, but I just respect you even more and connect you with you even more, because you've accomplished so much in your life and in your career. Many of our friends have been, brilliant musicians since they were really young. Really young. There was like never any question. And then there's those of us, you and I, and many others who always had a talent and a love and a passion and lessons and things like that. But really around college time started to dig in and figure it out.
Yeah.
And then become overachievers.
Well, I'll call it obsessed anyway.
Obsessed. That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good obsession.
Yeah.
There's so many others, poor choices of things to be obsessed with than art and music and bettering yourself. So there's the person who introduced us, Mike Smith. He's the artist rep, artist relations for cordial cables, which you and I both endorse. And I see Mike, Lisa brought you up on stage. So unmute yourself. And first of all, thank you for the introduction and thanks for joining us today for a minute.
Well, it's my pleasure. That's two of my favorite people there. How's it going, you guys?
Hey, Mike. This is a great opportunity to thank you for the cables for my pedal board. I was going to send you a before and after picture because it looked like a snake pit before I got those cables. And I have been wanting to clean that up for about 2 years. So it finally looks like a professional pedal board.
There you go. Well, I hope it worked out for you. And
thank you.
This is I'm thrilled that Terry asked me to come on because it's always really important for us to express the importance and value and love we have for these relationships that have been created. You guys now have a new relationship that I hope will go on into eternity as it can. But my whole job is this, and I just love it. I love it when we can make these kind of connections between people that we really care about and really are honored to have in our family.
Well, we appreciate you.
Gosh.
Thank you. Shucks.
Buy cordial cables.
Passing Kleenex early on today, Terry.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right, Lisa.
No. Well, we're just, again, we're really honored. Jennifer is the rock star on the front of our Pathways cover this month. If anybody out there listening, just chase down Cordial Pathways and you will see her in a lot of glory on the front page and inside too, in a big spread that we did related to education in the music industry. And her Guitar Cloud Symposium is the centerpiece of that whole conversation because we've been sponsoring it for over a year now. And it's just one of the coolest learning events we've seen. They just take really a lot of time to figure out how to present this in a way that's digestible and really interesting and with some just fantastic instructors that she has. So I really commend her and her team for putting that together. And I know it's not easy. And you got other things you'd like to be doing too, touring and stuff. But that Guitar Cloud Symposium is just an awesome thing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is not easy by any stretch. But when we have a session by the end of the weekend, I'm totally exhausted and extremely satisfied. Yeah. We've had anywhere from 4 to 6 instructors over the weekend and special guests like Steve Vai, Steve Lukather, all the Steves, Andy Timmons, Dweezil Zappa. And it's just so rewarding to have such a in a class situation on Zoom, to be able to let the students have access to these people that they would never get access to otherwise. And I think the seed for that was that's what I got when I went to the Guitar Institute of Technology. We had Larry Carlton, Pat Metheny, Emmett Chapman. Every month we had some new monster that would, plant seeds. I'd still remember things that instructors and guests said to me in 1979. So, you never know what is going to be shared with a student that will change their complete trajectory. They thought they wanted to go this way, and all of a sudden they're finding inspiration in a complete different path.
You were so spot on about that, Jennifer. And because I remember being at Miami-Dade Junior College when I first, got out of high school and got serious about music. Sonny Rollins came and spoke to our class.
Wow.
I don't even know how that happened. Somebody knew him or was playing in the band or something. And he talked about taking time off to, in a way, building in a sabbatical to his touring and recording experience, to step away from the music business to focus on music. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about. I certainly do now, and so do you. But I knew that it was true. Like, I could tell because he said it with such honesty and truth and passion that I thought there's something there. I've never forgotten that, and just that he would take a year off as a superstar musician to just go practice under the bridge,
Right.
in New York where he lived, at night. Just he would go there and just practice. And I thought, wow, there's some piece of information here I really need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And I have. So those kind of moments, and I applaud you for creating this symposium and doing an incredible job, and also an incredible amount of work with the learning curve of technology that we've all gone through during COVID to figure out the best light and the best mic and the best Zoom setting and latency and all the, I was going to say bullshit. It's not bullshit. All just the technical distractions to get back to the music, back to guitar, back to learning and sharing knowledge. And you're such at a perfect point in your life where mentoring for all of us, including this show, and Mike, what you do with Cordial Cables, it's just, in supporting workshops and clinics and we're supposed to be doing that right now, and I think you've always done clinics, but it becomes even so more important now because the time of our life when we're in to be sharing information.
I think one of the more important things about the Guitar Cloud Symposium is the community that she's created and her group has created. We're now in contact with 30 or 40 people that we didn't know before because of the Guitar Cloud Symposium. And that is, I think, the most important thing. We're always trying to get the band back together, right? Well, Jennifer's got a big ass band. She really does. So I know you guys got lots to talk about, and I don't want to do much more other than to say we appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Back at you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we appreciate you.
You guys have a great conversation. We're listening.
All righty.
Great. Thank you. So Jennifer, why don't you tell our audience where people can find out more about the symposium? Just go directly to your website, correct?
You can get there from jenniferbatten.com, but the symposium has its own website also, Guitar Cloud Symposium. Think it's for guitar players. It's in the cloud, and it's a weekend symposium that now is happening 4 times a year. And the next one coming up is November 2021. That's going to be our first ever songwriters workshop.
With our mutual friend, Jeff Paris, who I toured with Kev Mo. He's a brilliant songwriter and a badass guitar player, keyboard player, multi-instrumentalist, singer, everything. Actually,
I have to cut you off because he can't make it.
Oh, no.
I originally had that scheduled in the summer, and I think because of COVID, everybody wanted to not be staring at a computer in the summer. Right. So I moved it to November, and he's on tour. But Sarah Hickman, Vicky Genfan, and Tom Prasada Rao. And also a special guest is going to be Saida Garrett, which I'm really excited about because I toured with her on the Michael Jackson's History Tour. And if you don't know her, she wrote Man in the Mirror and also got a Grammy for a song that was in Dreamgirls, the movie. And she's funny as hell. So that's always a bonus.
So everybody go check it out. Dr. Lisa, if you're able to put that up on the scroll so people can see the website, we would appreciate that. One of the things that I had read about the symposium is that there's a certain, it opens up a door for certain people who might be kind of shy or self-conscious was the word that you used about playing in front of all these iconic guitar players, the teachers, yourself. And it, in some ways, there's pros and cons for doing it in a virtual room. But I think that the pros in many ways outweigh the cons and that's one of them. One is everybody has access. to these workshops and to all of to these wonderful mentors and teachers. But nobody does have to be intimidated, at any level.
Yeah.
At any level. I mean, and again, your story is the perfect example. It's not like you didn't study guitar your whole life. You've been playing since you were 8. You had great teachers along the way. You were, I'm sure, a solid player, but there were certain areas that are missing that always, there always will be. That's the beauty of music and art and being a professional athlete and anything. If you want to be the best in the world, there's always more to learn. So you're creating an environment, you have created an environment where people can really not feel judged.
Exactly. And I also have a members only Facebook group where I encourage people to post, and there are no trolls. You put yourself out there on Facebook or Instagram, and you're always going to get people go, it sucks. You got no chops. But, if that ever happens in our Facebook group, they get bounced. So,
right.
It encourages people to do that. It's a safe environment. You're going to get a lot of love from the other students. So what's not to love there?
Great. And thanks, Lisa. We do have the website scrolling. If anybody wants to catch it, just take a look. And you can, again, always go to jenniferbatten.com as well. So you were born in upstate New York and got your first electric guitar, right? Not acoustic, with the strings like a mile away from, from as I did. You were inspired. You've got 2 sisters, and one of your older sisters had a guitar too. So that was part of your inspiration. You talked about being inspired by the Beatles and the Monkees. My first album that I ever owned was the Monkees.
Really?
And it was a great, and Play Along with the Ventures. Do you remember that one? No. I don't even, it's some random album, but the very first song was called Tuning. And and I promise you, they play the low E string and wait for you to catch up with them.
Hilarious.
And then the A
Wow.
That was song number 1. Yeah.
Okay.
But one of the things about, obviously, the Beatles, because our whole world has been influenced by that group. The Monkees, I didn't realize until later that, that music really influenced me too, as a guitar player, as a songwriter, as an arranger and a producer. It really was kind of a masterclass. If you go back and listen to those records, they're really well made.
Oh, they had some great songwriters. Like Carole King was one of the songwriters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me, you buckle down, you work with Peter Sprague, you broaden your knowledge to get into a jazz school, because back in the time when we were in college, you were either in a classical conservatory or not. Or a jazz school that started to open up. I went to Berkeley. You went to GIT.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a pop program. Those things were kind of starting. So, in a way, it was kind of a blessing that you and I were exposed to jazz, because I think it really broadened us as musicians.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you went through a really intensive period of woodshedding after school. Like very disciplined. So talk about that for a moment, and then tell me about like these 8 years of, graduating and then ending up on a superstar global iconic tour, never, the likes never seen before, with Michael Jackson, because you got shot out of a cannon, but there was a lot that happened between those 2 moments. So let's lead into school, then what, into getting shot out of a cannon, and what that was all about.
One of the most valuable things about the school was, at that time, it was long before smartphones and laptops and all that. And we had these little workstations, and we had egg timers. And after each class, twice a day, we'd have an hour class followed by a 90-minute lab period to get down what we had just learned. And we would get this sheet of paper to add to the notebook, like work on this G7 arpeggio for 3 minutes or 7 minutes. And you would set the egg timer. And when it went off, you had to keep moving or you would get really behind.
Right.
And so that really kept you focused, no Facebook notifications or anything to get in the way. And after I graduated, I kept up the discipline, not with 7 or 12 minutes or anything, but with hours. I would set the egg timer and do an hour of ear training, an hour of sight reading, an hour of arpeggios, an hour of this and that, and an hour of jamming. And as time went on, that hour of jamming kept getting reset and reset and reset, because that's the fun part, right? You learn all this other crap so that you can improvise.
Right.
So I think within a year or so of graduation, I was the only one in the school that had never done a live gig. And my first live, I wanted to be a jazz player when I got out. I was surrounded by jazz players.
Okay.
Yeah. You would go in the office of the president of the school, and there was pictures of Joe Pass and Pat Martino and all these. And I'd go, I want to be the next Pat Martino, you know. And I was so ignorant. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have a record within a year of graduating. Well, it was 10 years, you know, the young mind, the folly of the young mind.
Or the beauty.
Yeah.
The not knowing.
My first gig was doing a jazz duet, reading real book tunes for $12.50. That's how much I made. I'll never forget that. And
a hot meal or no?
No.
Or just 50% off on food, right? I have those gigs.
This is the first rung of paying the dues, right?
Right.
And
Pay
I'll never
attention,
forget,
kids.
we rehearsed for a couple months, going over a bunch of different tunes, and all of a sudden, when there's an audience, I realized how uncool it was to be playing while your nose is in a book. Right. We were reading these tunes, and so that was lesson number one. Not long after that, I ended up in my first cover band, and that's because I was actually really getting into fusion, Lee Ritenour, Larry Carlton, that kind of stuff. And I saw Lee Ritenour play in town, and there was a local band opening for them. And I thought, man, I want to be in that band. And it's so funny how you plant a seed in the universe. I didn't contact anybody, but they contacted me. Just their guitar player quit. They needed another guitar player. And within a month, I was in that band.
Energetically, it was the right time and the right place for you. Yes.
However, as soon as I joined them, I brought my Gibson Birdland to the first rehearsal, and they decided they're going to go top 40. So all of a sudden, I'm playing the Police and Pat Benatar and that kind of stuff, which was great because I had no skill on stage whatsoever. So that was the band I cut my teeth with. And over the period of 3 years, we did cover band stuff. We also did fusion stuff, depending on what club was hiring us, and weddings, which has got to be one of the hardest gigs out there, trying to please all the different audiences, the kids and the grandparents and that sort of thing. So that...
And the caterer and the contractor. And
the
florist. And
we were not a top-notch wedding band. I will share that. But the bass player in the band was from LA. This is happening in San Diego, and the bass player was from LA and moved back up. And it seems like the day he moved up, he got a gig with Johnny Rotten. And the rest of us are so jealous, like, he made it. He's playing with the top punk of the universe. And it was really motivating. And one by one, we all moved up, trying to make it, for whatever that means. And before I got the Michael Jackson gig, I moved up in 84 and got the gig in 87. And in the meantime, I was teaching at GIT and playing in every band I could get in. I was in 5 different bands by the time I got with Jackson. And from my own band to there's that bass player I was talking about ended up, he had a band called Doc Tari that was kind of like the Chili Peppers in that it was rap because none of us could sing for shit. So we could talk.
Right.
And we were super goofy, man. We would put pipe cleaners in our hair. And I remember one time we decided, okay, this gig, we're going to be the cover of the Go-Go's record. So we put cold cream on our faces and ended up with all that shit in the strings and on our fingers. And so I always say there's a last time for everything.
Right.
But, when the Jackson thing came along, it's obviously turned my life upside down, and 10 times the amount of money I ever made before. And I was able to buy a house. I obviously beat
Wonderful.
it. 16 bars bought me a house.
Which, by the way, speaking about money, you don't need to get into the details, but did you have an agent, manager, friend, anybody guide you through the negotiations or the contract, or did they just say, you're hired, here's what you're getting, welcome to the family?
That I will talk about money because it's been so long
Okay.
ago.
Yeah.
The first thing was hilarious. My boyfriend was a drummer at the time that worked with Dwight Twilley, and he's gone on to work with a bunch of people. Bernie Pershey is his name.
Mhm.
And we were having a conversation about what to charge them. Right? I mean, I was just
That's
peeing my
cute.
pants with excitement. I would have gone for
Right.
$50 probably. He goes,
Yeah.
you need to charge $1,500 a week. And one of the guys took me outside and said, so what are you going to charge? And all the might I could muster, because at that time I was making $500 a week, teaching 7 days a week and doing all these other gigs that didn't pay. And I go, 1,500. And the guy goes, how about 4? And I thought, 400? My heart sank. And he goes, no, 4,000.
Right.
A week? I mean, the guy knew I was green as hell, and he was
Sure.
on my side.
That's
so,
great.
Whew, that was a nice paycheck.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And for me, the very first time I started getting paid well, my first touring experience was with Billy Preston. So it wasn't $4,000, it was down to the other side, and they weren't as nice about it. But of course I took the gig, and it was great. But the thing is, when I started working in television, music directing for a late night talk show, it was the first time that I had really been paid really well for my time. And I didn't come up in a wealthy family. And so, just middle class. And so it felt very, to my surprise and relief, felt very natural and to be compensated. Like I felt really good about being paid my value. And I actually thought that they're getting a really good deal for their money. Did you feel the same way, that they were getting a real bargain for $4,000? I mean, once you started and dug in, did you feel you were worth it?
I never thought about that, because that kind of money was really new to me.
It was new to me also, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's part of the getting shot out of a cannon. How did you adjust to being able to finally save up for a house? Was it go ahead.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, for somebody that's a guitar player and does not sing, to have that chunk of money, to be able to put a good chunk, 20% down or whatever, on a house, it was an incredible blessing, just incredible. But I will tell you, it's an interesting evolution of how you think about money. In fact, there's a book I highly recommend by Stuart Wilde called The Trick to Money is Having Some. and the whole idea of the book is the amount of money you get has so much to do with how you feel about yourself. And there's so many players that I just want to play, and it's such a gift to play, and they'll play for really cheap. And whenever people have asked me, what should I charge for this or that? I say, charge an amount that when you're doing the project or the tour, that you don't have any resentment about the number that you gave them. And I say that because I have had resentment. There was a trip to Birmingham, England, and it was a one-off thing. I did not charge enough, and I thought I was getting ripped off. I mean, at the end of my thing, they didn't pay me. They said, we'll meet you in the morning. They didn't show up. And eventually I did get paid, but I was thinking, I flew from the West Coast to England and back, and all the trauma that takes with the, excess luggage charges and all that crap. I will never do that again. And now I charge a good penny. And in fact, last week there was somebody that wanted me to fly to England to do a video. And I go, it's probably not worth your while, but this is what it's going to cost you.
Right.
Because flying is hell, especially now. There's so many flights being canceled, and I've had so many guitars broken and luggage missing, and you have no control over it. So you're paying for my stress in advance.
Right. Yeah, that's so well put. Have you ever had a personal manager or agent repping you so that you can focus on music and not have to handle to micromanage the business side of your career?
I've never had a manager for more than 5 minutes. I found them to be absolute nightmares. In fact, I'll tell you, I had one when I got the Jeff Beck gig. I basically told the guy, look, I mean, this is a dream gig, and I will work for coffee.
Right, right. So don't blow it for me. Right.
Don't be charging him the Michael Jackson kind of money. And he did. I don't remember what he asked, but I was absolutely appalled, and that was the end of him. Right. And I wrote straight to Jeff and said, you pick a number. Because it's the Michael Jackson money. He could fill a stadium with 50,000 people every single night.
Yes.
Jeff can get maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people, and it's a huge difference.
Right.
So you can't expect the same kind of pay.
And it's one of the challenges of the business that we're in, because when people say, what do you charge? It's you can't just have one number, or you're going to lose out on opportunity.
Sure.
Like you're saying. And so it makes it harder sometimes to maneuver through, not just that, but I think there's a real special skill set in being able to make sure you don't lose sight of your value.
Yes.
When you say yes, if you're coming from getting $4,000 a week, and then somebody asks you to play for $100 in a club, if you do it, you need to feel really good about doing it, and good about the people you're doing it with, and the music. Like, many of, I'm sure both of our experiences, and anybody who's been a guest on my podcast in the last 5 years will tell you that there's certain things that the money wasn't the deciding factor, and they're really glad that it wasn't, because it opened up an opportunity. As a matter of fact, but keeping your self-worth in check, in your value, or not ever feeling disrespected, like you said, or taken advantage of. I agree with you. That's extremely important. And it's a balancing act to be able to do that.
I have to tell you a memory that just popped in of a guy that wanted to be my manager, that one of the first gigs he was offering, I mean, this was after I did the Super Bowl. He wanted me to do something for free or for shit money for exposure. And I'm looking at the phone going, really? I just played for 1.5 billion people.
Right.
But having said that, the manager agent, for the first time in my life, I do have an agent. I started a cover band locally because I want to travel less. And man, it's to not have to barter price is well worth what they charge. Well,
absolutely.
Worth it. Yeah,
I agree. Well, I'm glad you have that in your life right now, and that's working out for you. I think it's great when we have the opportunity for that, especially like independent artists like ourselves. And that's so funny about the exposure, because we've been hearing that our whole lives. This is going to be good for, a lot
I
of
got
people
your exposure swinging.
That's right. Suck on this.
All right.
Speaking of, what was your fondest memory of playing the Super Bowl with Michael? Because that was an iconic event, and I'm sure there's stories but I'm curious, what was like the fondest memory that you had, and also the biggest challenge for that particular job?
Biggest challenge was getting through the goddamn traffic. Because we had done a rehearsal the day before, and there was zero traffic, and I'm thinking, great, I'll leave at this time. Duh. All of a sudden there's 50,000 football fans in there. There's a few memories that pop out. It was so fun because it was so different from what we had been doing before.
Right.
It was only going to happen once. It was live. It's the only time that I ever felt Michael was nervous, which, can you imagine your own name on the marquee knowing it's going out to 80 nations live? Thankfully that was before the internet, or that pressure would have been on him too. Like, it's going to be on YouTube forever. For me, it was just super fun. I was headbanging like a monster, and my neck hurt the next day. But I didn't get the memo of what was going to happen. Even like, we were compartmentalized. Like, the band worked on the medleys that we did, because it was different from what we did on shows. Mm-hmm. And when the whole show started, you could do a freeze frame, because when there was an impersonator that popped out of the scoreboard, you'd see the video of Michael spinning up, and then this impersonator would pop out in smoke. I didn't know that was going to happen. So you see me going, holy shit, what the hell? And then it happened on the other side of the stadium. Then we did our thing, and at the end there was Heal the World, or there's another one that sounds just like it with another name. I can't even remember. But that was the ending song. And all these kids got out on the field with cards that made pictures when they all came together. I didn't know that was going to happen either. Mm-hmm. Would have been nice to get the memo.
You think?
Yeah.
Well, there's so many moving parts. I guess people it's compartmentalized, like you said. Yeah. I would think a music director or tour manager would hopefully be able to have access to that information and share it, but that's, it's not always as it seems.
Yeah.
We were talking about Jeff Beck again for a moment, and one of the things that I wanted to not ask you, but just sort of make mention of is that you're getting asked to play with Jeff Beck didn't just sort of happen randomly. When you were on tour with Michael Jackson, you reached out to Jeff Beck. You took the initiative to do that. And just tell me, like, where did you get the idea to do that, the balls to do that, or the confidence, and how did that go?
I was obsessed with Jeff for years. And I learned every solo from the Blow by Blow record and the Wired record. And I would play along with those. And I had in mind of doing a Jeff Beck tribute at one point. And then once I learned them all, I got scared and never did it. Because I thought, man, what if I'm in the middle of this worked out solo and I forget? It just seemed like too much pressure. Anyway, on the Bad tour, Rory Kaplan was one of the keyboard players along with Greg Fillinganes. Mm-hmm. And he knew, we had talked about Jeff, and he goes, yeah, I worked with Jeff with Jan Hammer. He was teching, and I'll hook you two up. And the bastard never did it. And so I thought, damn it. When I found out I was taking off again on the Dangerous tour and we were going to England, I go, he lives in this island somewhere. So every show that we did in various countries, I would talk to the Sony reps that were there after the shows and say, anybody know how to get in touch with him and get him to a show? And eventually somebody came through. And it was one of the shows we played at Wembley Stadium. And he had VIP tickets and VIP parking, and 2 opening acts went on. And then Jeff showed up because he didn't want to see the opening acts. And then Michael canceled. So the whole thing blew up. And I thought he was in one of VIP tents. And you got all these pissed off people leaving the stadium, 80,000 people in that stadium, crying kids, people that had flown in from other countries. And it was just a nightmare. They were going out and I was going across them like an idiot with my hair up 3 feet high. I mean, they could have pummeled me, but I wasn't about to miss my opportunity to meet Jeff. Well, it turns out he got turned away at the gate because the cancellation had been called. Mm-hmm. And so I called him up the next day and said, man, I don't know when or if they're going to make up the show, but can I meet you anyway? And he said, sure. So I met him at a studio in London that he was recording his rockabilly record. And I went in there, and it was so bizarre because I knew his music so well and had listened and played the solos 1,000 times, but I didn't know him as a person. It was long before the internet, and all I could get was from, 1 or 2 radio interviews or Guitar Player magazine. In fact, I used to hang out in this boutique record shop long before CDs, and they had in the back, they had stacks of British music magazines. And I would sit there for hours going through them, trying to find out anything about Jeff. So anyway, that's how obsessed I was. And I got tons of bootleg cassettes back then, and later bootleg CDs. So anyway, I got to meet him, and I had one of those big honking video cameras. And immediately I asked him to play Blue Wind. And he starts playing it, and my battery dies. And then I put in my spare battery, and I hadn't charged that either. Like, but in that amount of time, he did something that made the notes come alive that I hadn't gotten. I had the notes, but I didn't have it bent the way he did it. And so it was like a 5-second education that changed everything. And then my first record had come out. I met him during the Dangerous tour in '92, and I gave him a copy of my first record. And I had also just done a thing for MTV. I did a video for Flight of the Bumblebee, and they had done a thing on the Headbangers Ball over there. So, and they gave me copies of it. So I gave that to him as well. It's like, here's my offerings, maestro, thinking that he probably never listened to it, but I made the connection. I got my autograph and I went about my way.
Yeah, you met him. You got to talk with him.
Yeah.
With him. Yeah.
And then he called me a couple months later and said, I finally listened to your record. Let's record together. And I just peed my pants. It's like, hello?
Right. How wonderful. How wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, that was real fairy tale material there.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of wanting something and being hungry for something and being bold enough to just ask, to reach out, to take the initiative.
Yeah.
Look, people can say yes or no. There's generally one of two things are going to happen. You got a 50-50 shot, at starting the conversation. Yeah.
And his manager had told me that when he hires people, he wants to know that you've got some experience. So,
yes.
Michael Jackson was the calling card for that. Yes, I can play on these big stages without dying,
Right. Yeah.
So, and then, okay, here's the catch. Like, I'm still crapping myself when I'm on my way. His manager is driving me to his house, right? In fact, I'll back up even further. He never auditioned me. He just said that before I said recording, but then he invited me to do a tour without ever having played with me. At that point, it was on the strength of 2 records I had done. And I thought, I don't know him that well. He might be bonkers. And I didn't tell anybody that this opportunity was a possibility. And so I learned the Guitar Shop record, and I flew to Europe for doing a techno session in Italy. And I booked myself to London to basically force an audition on myself in his presence, just to make sure he wasn't nuts. And needless to say, it went well, and we toured for 3 years and did a couple records.
It's such a great story. I want to ask you, and by the way, Lisa, I'd love to, I'm going to ask one more question, but I'd love to get audience participation, or if anybody has comments or questions, including you, Dr. Lisa. So while you're rounding that up, which I would imagine you already have in place, knowing you, let me ask you this, getting back to Michael, getting shot out of a cannon, there's nothing we could read or learn in school that would prepare us for what it's like to play in front of 100,000 people or travel the world and do the being 30 feet away from the next musician on stage because it's a large stage, or, all of those things. But there's also the wardrobe and styling aspect of it, where they basically reinvented you as a rock icon, as a woman, and did some incredible things with your hair, changing your hair color, making it as big as your playing is, making it large and proud and bold. Great outfits, great everything. What was that like for you? Was it kind of was it overwhelming? I'm sure part of it was fun and incredible, but what was that experience like for you?
I'm sure there was a good chunk of my subconscious that was overwhelmed. And when I first noticed that is when I did my first interview. I think it was from Music Connection or some LA magazine. Mm-hmm. And, I think anybody that wants to be in this business, that plays in bands, you've done plenty of reading of interviews by other people. And so you have these fantasy conversations. What if they asked me that question? This would be my answer. Mm-hmm. So here it is. Here's your first interview. And my teeth started chattering. I mean, this is LA in the summer.
Literally, your teeth started chattering.
It was nerves. Yeah. And I remember I was so embarrassed and I couldn't stop my teeth from chattering. And the guy goes, "Are you cold?" And it's like 80 degrees. No,
Mhm.
I'm just having a thing happen here. So, yeah,
It's a lot. It is a lot
it
to
is. Yeah.
it's to be thrust in front of so many people, in such a way and be just so exposed. It's kind of unnatural. It's really amazing, but it's
And
not a
there's,
natural state
it is not. No.
walking through the world.
No, and it promotes a lot of jealousy from players
Yeah.
that think they should have got the gig,
Right.
and judgment, and it helped to know that the dancers
Wow.
went through the same thing.
Yeah. By the way, I thought you should have gotten the gig. I was on your team.
Oh,
There
well,
was never
bless
any
you.
question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the overwhelm also manifested in, well, I think part of that was mental, but part of it was physical. Also, in doing rehearsals where I had a guitar on my back 10 hours a day,
Yeah.
I reached this point where I felt like I didn't have 100% control in my fingers because there was so much tension in my shoulders, just wanting to get everything perfect. And it is a lot.
Well, and it's incredibly physical. You would run, you would sprint on stage with that guitar in your hand to
That
get
was
to
before,
center stage.
that was long before my knee replacement.
Oh, you're not kidding, right?
I am not kidding. No.
Okay, yeah.
Actually,
I've
that
had
was from a rock and roll
replacement,
accident.
okay.
I jumped up on stage years ago when I was in a cover band, and when I landed, the knee dislocated and fractured. And so they go, in another 20 years, you're going to have trouble with this, with arthritis. And
Right
it
on
got
schedule.
to the point where,
Yeah,
anyway, boring.
not at all. So all in all, like when you first started seeing yourself on video or just looking in the mirror, before you would walk out on stage, did you pretty quickly learn to have fun with it and enjoy it or embrace it? Or was it just odd to see yourself looking just so fucking amazing? I don't usually use profanity on this show, but I mean, you really did it. They like, your headpieces and everything, lasers coming out of your guitars, and it's a lot.
Yeah, well, there was 100 people in the entourage. There was somebody hired to paint pictures of all the performers in 3 different costumes. Then they hired the makeup artist to make that painting come to life. And they, they'd take us one by one to go get our hair cut and dyed and whatever they were going to do. And then they would hire wardrobe people to carry that out. And it was just like, it's kind of like joining the army, but it's Michael's army, right. And you're not going to get killed, most likely. It's just like full immersion. I actually hired somebody to take my dog to San Diego to my parents' house because I was never home.
Right.
So, yeah, it all in. That's all that's happening, and that's fine with me. But I'll tell you a really interesting moment. I remember our first gig was in Japan. And I remember we flew in, and then we all went to our respective rooms. And I remember laying on the bed going, I thought I would feel different. I thought I would feel like somebody else. And I'm still me, but I have a badass gig.
Right.
That was a moment that just hit me like, almost
That's
like
really profound and powerful what you just said, and so accurate. Right. I remember the first time I was on TV, leading a band, and it was still me. Nothing had changed except the situation and adding a couple zeros to my salary.
There's so much illusion involved in fame.
Right.
And a lot of people can't handle it, so they'll dive into drugs or alcohol or whatever to try to.
Was that ever a problem for you?
No. Luckily, no.
Yeah.
I will say I drank a fuckload of alcohol on Jeff Beck's tour. But when the tour was over, it's almost like my liver was going, oh, thank God.
Right.
Because we would have 2 bottles of champagne waiting for us after every single show. And then if there was a day off, we'd go to the bar. And it was just 3 years of just nonstop fun. But it's not something I kept up afterwards.
Absolutely. That's great. So Lisa.
Yes. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So jump on in or invite people in.
So if there is someone who wants to ask a question, please go ahead and use the 2 little bars in that little black circle in the lower left of your phone, hit it and request to be on stage. In the meantime, I'm in love with this woman. So
Me too.
So you have self-empowerment for the modern musician experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm taking her back a couple of years because the word empowerment is like in my life.
Ah,
And so I was going to ask you something. First of all, you went from an Elvis impersonator to working with Michael Jackson, which is just in itself should be like a book title. What is it that you were teaching people about being empowered in music, and what was it that helped you gain empowerment? Because I'm curious, when you said I still felt like me. So what do you think it was about you, other than the fact that you're a phenomenal musician, that got you hired? Because we know, talent, there's always talent. We can find talent, but sometimes it's those intangibles that are the things that put us over the edge. So what do you think your intangible was, and what have you done to help enhance your empowerment?
you know what? I'll let you know on a little secret. I was talking about being in all these different bands in LA, and everybody wants to be discovered playing original music. And there reached a point where, I'm doing all these gigs, but I'm not in it really now, but I was in a Buddhist sect that I was doing this thing where I would chant every morning and every evening and read all this Sanskrit shit. I had no idea what I was saying, but it was a discipline. and then you're supposed to write out 10 things you want to manifest in your life. And I did for a minute. And then I thought, there's only one thing I want. I want to be in the right band. And I didn't say what band that was going to be. Just the right band for me. And I chanted and did the bead thing morning and night for 30 days, and boom, Michael Jackson. And why I don't chant every day now, I can't tell you.
Yeah, why'd you stop?
Because I'm an idiot. I guess
she hit the mother load of chant.
Right.
I mean,
I must love the struggle.
That
the
was
mother
too
load
easy.
of chant.
30 days.
Yeah.
Yep, 30 days. And I've talked to people that have done similar things that have done it in less time. There was somebody in Cirque du Soleil that got his thing in 2 weeks. So I think it's focus and putting your energy and planting that seed out there.
Intention.
Yeah, big time.
Absolutely.
Oh, we could talk about intention for a whole other hour.
Sure.
I've had some pretty powerful things happen. But the self-empowerment for the modern musician was my first traveling seminar. And that was kind of like the seed that led up to the Guitar Cloud Symposium. And I did that, 6 or 8 years ago. I lose track of time. But I had a motorhome, and I did almost every Sam Ash in the country doing this seminar. And I wanted it. There were so many things I would find from doing Skype students that they didn't know, that I was like, how could you not know this? I need to empower you with this information. And so...
Are you talking about music or life information? Or both?
Both, but music focused.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of TED Talks, so I thought there's so much information I want people to know. I'm going to break it down into 20-minute chunks of here's information you need to know about travel if you want to be a pro musician. Here's, all these different subjects. And one of them was an app that I want to marry called Transcribe. That there's so many times that I run into players like, we all listen to the same song. Then we get to rehearsal and I'm hearing wrong notes. Like, why is that? Well, there's apps now that make it so much easier to almost be a forensic scientist. And,
well put.
There's no excuse now not to get the notes right. So sometimes mixes are hard to hear, but with this app, you can also EQ it and boost the instrument that you want to hear. You can delete the bass. You can do karaoke and get rid of the vocal. So that was one of the things that I did. And I also talked about things I did wrong. Why reinvent the wheel? You can learn from my experiences. So that self-empowerment, I just thought if people know all that I know, then it's just going to bring them up to another level of less scuffle.
Thank you for sharing that, because it speaks to your heart and your ability to give back freely and easily. And I'm going to connect it to your Michael Jackson page on your site, because just kudos to you for having that kind of level of love and respect for somebody that you work with, to just have a page to say, come on, people.
Yeah, that it was a big deal, and I probably would not have done it if I hadn't been in the band, because we are fed news, and we choose to believe things or not believe things. And it's very rare that somebody, unless you're a journalist or a really good journalist, is going to really dive deep into a subject to find out, is this true? And it's just so much easier for journalists to copy paste. In fact, the recent Facebook bust with the whistleblower shows exactly what's been going on for years. I mean, long before Facebook, is that if it bleeds, it leads. Negative news is going to be shared way more than positive news. And the whole thing with Michael is he was an easy target. He liked kids.
Absolutely. Yep.
He started Neverland to give kids an opportunity to get together and play and go on roller coasters. And, you know, he paid millions of dollars to pay for cancer treatments for kids. And
that nobody knew about. Just doing it.
Yeah, that's how he felt good. And on days off on the road, he would go to hospitals and visit kids. Not many people knew about that. So the whole thing where everybody takes it for granted that he was a pedophile, it's like, no, you need to look deeper into it. And I could go off on that.
I appreciate you just touching on that. I think that's really important. It's really important.
Yeah. Just a brief tangent. When 9/11 happened, I hadn't watched the news for years. And all of a sudden I'm glued to the TV, watching the planes hit over and over and over again. And eventually I'm going, I'm not getting any news about this. They're not telling us anything like, why did they do this? And they never did. You know, it's just Bush got up there and said, they hate our freedom. That's why they did it. Well, there's a whole other conversation if you ask them why that happened. And I noticed when I flew to other countries, whether it was England or Japan, I would get CNN, but it was a whole different conversation.
Yes.
That blew my mind. So that's enough of politics.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Jivan, before I get to my closing questions, if you've got another couple minutes, Jennifer, I just wanted to ask one other thing. And Lisa, am I interrupting you or any of our other audience members?
You're fine. You're great.
Okay. You know, one of the things that's wonderful is that you were one of the very few women to grace the cover of Guitar Player magazine. And congratulations on that. I think it's fantastic and totally deserved. But I just want to address the very fact that we have to say that, that you're one of the very few women, that struck a nerve in me. I felt like it was worth just asking or mentioning. Has your gender held you back ever? I certainly, there have been times, I'm sure, where it's worked to your advantage, where in meaning that it's great to have another woman in a band or another person of a certain ethnicity, or, we've all experienced that. But has it, what's your take on being a woman in the music business?
There have been plenty of times where I've run into obvious prejudice, because there's lots of women can play music, but when you're soloing and you're playing rock and roll, that's kind of getting into men's turf. At that time, it was pretty rare. I would get compliments like, "You play just like a boy."
Yeah.
Sure. What does that even mean?
Right.
Some boys play great. Some boys do not.
Right.
So, but I knew the energy behind it was positive. So is what it is.
It's a compliment, but it's an insult at the same time.
Yeah. When I moved to LA, my dad gave me a loan to get started. And I had about 3 months to get it together before I had to get a day job. And one of the last thing, if this doesn't happen, I have to get a day job, was an audition for a cover band. And I'd learned to sing songs, and that's kind of out of my wheelhouse. But I put a lot of work into it. And
did you take voice lessons?
What's that?
You took voice lessons or got a coach or just started
No,
practicing?
there wasn't time for that. It's like,
none of that.
Come next
you
week.
Just started singing.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I did that and I learned the songs, and I got in there, and the leader at the end of it said, "Yeah, that was really good. But we always have trouble with chicks." Not that, you bastard, time wasting son of a bitch.
Right. Why am I here? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw that on your site and I was like,
Yeah. Well, times have changed. And when I got the Jackson gig, Wendy and Lisa had already been playing with Prince.
Right.
And there was a female player that was in the Billy Idol videos playing keyboards. And I thought, okay, this is the revolution. Now it's going to change. Especially the biggest act in the world has got a woman on stage. And then 30 years went by with not a lot of change. But now, I say probably in the last 5-6 years, maybe a little longer, because of the internet, once people got high speed and could see all these players around the world, there's plenty of women. I always say there's not a week that goes by that I don't get turned on to some 7-year-old in Indonesia that can kick my ass.
Right. The great equalizer. Yeah. The internet. Right.
Yeah. So it's now something that people wouldn't ever consider, having a woman in the band. Now people are advertising for it because now it's hip. Yep. And there's such great players like Rhonda Smith, Tal Wilkenfeld. I keep naming bass players, but Mohini
Our friend
Day.
Mindy Abair, who put an album out called Pretty Good for a Girl. As a joke. I've got the t-shirt.
Right.
Or not a joke, but just tongue in cheek, making a point. Because she's heard it as well.
Well, there's so many monsters out there, like
absolutely
Neely Brosh. It can't be denied. The musicality is there. The chops are there.
Kat Dyson, another friend of ours, who is one of the teachers that works in your program.
Yeah. So it's a different world now. I didn't realize I was being a pioneer at the time, or didn't give it much thought.
Yeah, I think you probably were a role model for a lot of young girls, and that must feel good to have played some small part in confidence building and breaking down barriers.
Yeah, until I get on an airplane and go, oh God, you really don't want this career. What have I done?
The reality sinks in. Yeah, it's not that glamorous,
it's not.
Folks.
Well, in fact, I remember on the Bad tour, I was walking out of my hotel room and I saw Greg Phillinkins had his door open. He was talking to some fans. And I remember he was saying, it's not as glamorous as you think. And this was my first tour. And I go, hell, you say? It doesn't get better than this. Are you kidding me?
Right.
I mean, on the tour like that, we were so pampered. I mean, business class flights everywhere. As long as our luggage was packed and outside of our rooms, we didn't even see it till the next hotel room. Right. There was no schlepping anything. It just like, we got a day off. You want to go to the Rome Colosseum? What should we do today? Right. It was like a paid vacation, seriously.
And then it happens. Somebody just makes it happen.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Magic.
Yeah. Magic. Many of us often say that, the glamorous part is the 90 minutes on stage. Everything else is what we really get paid for, essentially, you joked about it earlier, like we would get on stage and play for free or for $50. And there's some truth to that, or because it's what we love doing and what we've trained our whole lives to do and crave. But a big part of the compensation is the preparation, the years of preparation, the hours of preparation, even after you're at pro level, to prepare for a gig, a tour, a record date, a TV show, anything, a teaching seminar, hours. Yeah. So it's been certainly hours well spent for you.
Well, thank you. I mean,
yeah.
I did one of the Guitar Class Symposium events that we did was getting the good gigs. And Pete Thorne was, and that's the one with Kat Dyson was on as well, and Jude Gold. Or no, somebody else, I can't remember. His brain is scrambled. But it's the homework. Why do people want to hire you? If they know you're going to do the homework and be prepared, that's huge. And a lot of people skate. They pull a Nancy Kerrigan like a motherfucker.
That's right.
In fact, you know what? I just did. You're talking about playing for $50 or whatever. I did a tribute benefit for the Kingsmen, the guys that did Louie Louie.
Yeah.
Their original guitar player passed away not long ago. And so they had a tribute. And so I played. And I played Born on the Bayou and Susie Q and some other stuff. And so I learned the solo on the record. I mean, they gave me a long stretch to improv after that, but I got the tones down, because you got to have that tremolo or it's not the song.
That's right.
And the only reason I bring that up is because somebody after the fact, after it was all done, and said, he came up to me and just said, "Thank you for doing your homework."
Oh, right.
And, for me, I'm not going to do it because I think that's what is required. But, I've had plenty of people that'll try to skate and you go, no, that is not how it goes. So those are the people that get the gigs.
It does. And it still stands out, ironically, even showing up early and getting thanked for that. That's part of the job. But, when people notice those things, it always kind of reminds me that not everybody has the same level of integrity and respect for the music. They, a lot of musicians who are really talented just sort of ride in on thinking they can just wing it because they've got chops.
Yeah.
And that's, Lisa, you said that earlier, there are a lot of talented people. It takes more than just talent to get asked to do the gig and to be asked back again.
Yeah. Big time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's all, well, that leads to my closing questions. And one of them is, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally?
I think making it is an illusion to me. I mean, when I got the biggest tour in the world with Michael Jackson, you could call that making it. But what happens between that tour and the next tour when you don't know if there's another tour coming up? Well, I was back teaching at Musicians Institute and doing what I was doing before. And so it's, some people can hit the feast level and stay there. But I think it's much more common to feast and famine. And that has been my routine, sadly.
And mine.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that. Making it is an illusion. I used to tell people I'm gainfully unemployed.
And
I think you need to be super flexible as to what you can do.
Yeah.
I think almost all the players, even the top players out there, are not just playing shows. They're writing books, they're doing courses, they're, selling merch, they're just involved in a little bit of everything, because for most of us, it takes all of that to pay the bills.
Right. It's hard to get by on just being one thing and just doing one thing, regardless of how well you can do it. Case in point, you're one of the, I can say you might not, but you're one of the most accomplished guitar players in the world. And
don't make me blush, mister.
I'll stop. I'll stop. But the thing is, it's still, the same thing happened with me on my very first tour. Like, okay, here we go. I've started, or I'm touring the world with Billy Preston. I come back and I couldn't get arrested.
Right.
And there's a humility that that just steps right to the front of the line. It doesn't even creep in, where it's like, you're back to teaching at the Guitar Institute.
Yep. I've had a lot of comments along the way where people assume I'm a total asshole because that's how they see people that are making a buttload of money and doing the top tours, that they're going to be super arrogant and everything.
Okay.
And I remember not that long ago, I went on just a weekend casino gig with a new drummer I hadn't played with before, and we shared a ride together. And he basically says, "How come you're not an asshole?" Because he was getting to know me, and I guess I didn't seem real asshole-y. And he said, with your resume, Jeff Beck and Michael Jackson, I go, man, if your ears are open, truly open, and you hear all the talent that's out there, how you cannot be humbled by it and just go, I'm just doing my thing in my corner. I just want to keep playing and making a living and keep getting better, and knowing that there is no rival. I remember talking to Joe DiOrio, who was one of the my
Who, by
favorite
the
teacher.
way, Joe Diorio, one of the premier jazz guitar players and instructors on the planet, taught at Miami-Dade Junior College when I first started school there. I studied with Joe
Oh, no
too
shit.
before he moved to California. So I had wanted to just tell you that because I knew that he was a part of your life as well. So continue.
I
Joe
memorized
Diorio.
his book, Innovative Designs, cover to cover.
Mhm.
Man, I was obsessed with him. I would go to every show that he did, every single show, and just be dragging the next morning to class.
Mhm.
And I basically asked him an ignorant student question at one time, kind of like, you know, how long does it take to get there? Like the elusive there. And his response was, man, I'm only on the first rung of the ladder. And I'll never forget that because I thought,
Right.
you are the epitome of badass and you see yourself as the first rung of the ladder.
Mhm.
That's one of those lessons from 30, 40, 50 years ago that I'll never forget.
Right.
Mm.
That's a beautiful, it's so beautiful that he had that impact on you and that you're able to have that impact on other people, you know, like that just kind of the whole aspect of passing the torch, sharing the information, and not just, you know, not just the technical, but the integral part of how to have a good life along the way.
Mm.
You know, what it really all means, you know, how to do that. Can you share three? I've got two more questions for you.
Yeah.
Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career, in addition to this whole masterclass that you've just given? You know, sharing your stories.
I thought about one today when I was
Mhm.
walking the dogs, and that's another voice from the distant past from that school. There was a composition teacher that said, "Don't ever wait for inspiration. Just get to your craft every day, and it will come." I think there's millions of people that are waiting for inspiration, and their guitars are collecting dust. You know, you got to spend time with the instrument, and not every time you work with it is something valuable going to happen, but you have to do it. Yeah, but being prepared for the gig, you know, when you have tunes, I remember there was a really famous drummer that I'm a big fan of that got an opportunity to play with a top tier metal band, actually, although I wouldn't consider him a metal drummer.
Mhm.
And he showed up not knowing any of their music. He did get the gig, but he didn't stick with it. I mean,
Right.
he got
Yeah.
fired. So yeah, you got to have respect for it. And if you don't have respect for it, how about not taking the gig?
Yeah, there you go. That's an option.
Yeah, I could go off on that tangent for a while. Listen to everything. That's another thing that I remember when I used to go see Joe Diorio. I was a jazz snob at the time. I
Mhm.
sold a bunch of my rock records, which I regret. And,
Mhm.
you know, I'm at this level now. And I remember saying something about that when I walked into the club and Joe Diorio was playing with Bob Magnuson, upright player. And I said, talking down about rock or something like that. And he kind of slapped me upside the head and said, don't have that attitude. Listen to everything. And that made a huge impact.
Right, especially from somebody who really appeared to be just a pretty much stay in your lane, brilliant jazz guitar player, but still to have the understanding of the importance of just exposing yourself to everything
Yeah.
and being open, not just exposing, but being curious.
I mean, we're all supposed to be creative beings. And if you only listen to one thing, you know, you've got all these colors here you could choose, but you only want gray. You know,
Mhm.
what the hell? That's the only way music evolves, is taking things from everything. In fact, one of the greatest blessings of being able to travel, and well, the first tour was 87. Man, I would gather up music. This was before the internet. So getting ethnic music from different countries wasn't so easy.
Mhm.
Unless you went to the small bin at the end of the row at Tower Records and
Right.
just took your chances. I remember we went to Turkey, and I went to a record shop in Istanbul that was only cassettes at that time, and I just loaded up just because that's such an exotic sound. The whole Eastern thing with the different scales and stuff, it's just so enriching. And it's really, well, I would say it's really affected my life, but so did Tarzan.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I remember Sunday afternoons watching Tarzan with the African drums. Just
Johnny
the groove of
Weissmuller.
it. Oh my God, it just
Yeah.
transported you to a
Yes.
whole other world.
Yeah.
And fast forward, my, let's see, the second record called Momentum was really world beat influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that stuff. Like, it's almost like, I'm kind of circling back into pop music because I'm doing a cover band now.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of music, I'll listen to it and you hear a verse and chorus and you go, I know the end of the story. I don't need to listen to the other 3 minutes. You know?
Right. I got it.
But you know, one of my favorite records of all time, you can find it on YouTube, but it's not on iTunes anymore for some reason. There's when I played with Jeff Beck, he got me into electronica. And there's an artist named Adam Freeland. It has a record called Tectonics.
Tectonics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's electronica, but it's almost like classical in that it's not a verse, chorus, bridge. It's these morphing themes. And he might come back to a theme in 2 minutes that's exactly the same as the first, but he's changed the snare drum sound. You know, just building this excitement and just mind blown. That's one of my favorite desert island records.
Did you collect instruments around the world as well? Did you bring home a bouzouki or anything, or you not that kind of?
No, my luggage is an issue.
Right.
I did get, well, I had a didgeridoo shipped back from Australia.
Okay. Yeah.
And that pissed my dogs off. So that went on the wall immediately. Yeah. I'm not even a collector of guitars. I don't like to change strings. I like my one guitar, even though I have 6. The others just collect dust pretty much. So no.
Speaking of strings, shout out to D'Addario for being a string company that you and I both endorsed for most of our careers. All of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. New York XL.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, no, I've gone down because of a little bit of arthritis. I cleaned up my diet and that had a lot to do with inflammation. But before that happened and I was having trouble with my knuckles, I went to 8s, really, really slinky strings. And
wow, that's light. Yeah.
Normally, you know, my memory from my youth is if I played 8s, I'm going to break it within a half hour. I don't ever break strings.
You don't? That's so interesting.
Almost never. And I do some really high bends too.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that because of your technique or the guitars or just
I think
the
it's
strings,
the improvement in strings over the years.
Oh, there you go.
It's the recipe, which is a total mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, well, let me get to my final question because I don't want to keep you too much longer. We've already gone over, which I really appreciate.
Sure.
And am totally enjoying. And you're always welcome to come back to the show because you're right. There's so many topics that you said I could do an hour on this and I could with you as well. So open invitation, Jennifer.
Well, some of that would just be bitching. So you don't want to go.
That's
there.
okay. That'd be fun too. We might get more audience participation.
Right? Well, for sure. Yeah.
My closing question at this point of your life with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Chill the fuck out. You know, wherever I've been, I always want to be here. And there's so much angst about not being there. And when I get here, I want to be here. And there's a perpetual dissatisfaction, which on the positive side, it keeps you growing. But on the negative side is just enjoying the journey, which I think all old people can tell young people that enjoy the journey, and young people are going to go, no, I want to be there now. You know, especially when it comes to the fame thing. I tell you, I was in Joe DiOrio's class, one of the first days of school. And he said, okay, in this class, who wants to be rich and famous? And my hand shot up and I was the only one. I was the only one, and I was embarrassed. Like, oh, is that not a cool thing to want? You know, but it's almost like the illusion, the call of fame, where you don't really know what that is. And I think Rick Springfield said this in a VH1. you think it's this thing, and you think you're going to feel a certain way about yourself when you're there. And then you don't. All that happens, it's the same person with a giant magnifying glass and judgment and all this other negative shit that can come at you. It's, man, keeping your focus as just wanting to be a better player.
Right.
If that's all you want and you spend time with it every day, then your life is pretty good.
I would say so. Absolutely. Well, let me, before we say goodbye and thank you to everybody. Well, I will thank everybody right now, but I want to give you closing words if there's anything else you want to add. So let me lead by just saying what a pleasure it is to have you on the show and to get to know you and to share your story and your perspective. Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Cordial Cable for the hookup.
That's right. For the introduction and for the great cables that we love.
Yeah.
Dr. Lisa, as always, your moderating and your input is invaluable. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Love
you.
being here. Nice meeting you, Jennifer.
Good to meet you too. Thank you.
And to our virtual audience, all of you who have been with us in this conversation, we literally see you. We see your pictures and your names there. So we know you're there with us. We appreciate you. And to anybody listening to the archive versions, thank you again. And share and spread the word and keep coming back every week with us. And on that, how would you like to close this conversation, Jennifer?
I don't have any more words left.
Right. We pretty much covered everything. Yeah.
Just
that's okay.
JenniferBatten.com to check out the news and Guitar Cloud Symposium if you want to join our singer-songwriter event or any future events coming up. That's
great. So everybody, I encourage you to go there and go download Jennifer's music and sign up for her classes. And even if you don't, go check them out and go let people know, because it's just great work and it's important work. And you'll learn something. And you'll have some fun along the way too, and have your ass handed to you and be encouraged. All of those things are going to happen. So everybody, again, thank you so much. And Jennifer, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Everybody stay safe, stay inspired. See you all next week.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Wollman.